This video is brought to you by Keeps. Stick around to hear more about the discount that they're providing to the entire upper echelon community. 2020 was a year afflicted by not one, but two separate pandemics. One was, of course, COVID-19, but the other was a disease called scalping. In basic terminology, scalping is the process of buying then reselling products for a significant markup, and theoretically it can be done to any retail item in the entire world. Obviously, scalpers typically aim for items with a substantial degree of scarcity involved, but the basic functionality is pretty simple. Buy something from a company and then sell it to other people for more than you paid. One of the most historically vibrant markets, I would say, when it comes to scalping is ticket sales. Concerts, sporting events, you name it. If you go, it's highly likely there will be someone outside with a fistful of tickets trying to sell them for a premium. Honestly, scalping is as old as commerce itself, it truly is, but more recently it's been undergoing a bit of a growth spurt. In 2020 primarily, fueled by lockdowns and most importantly, boredom, the video game industry absolutely exploded. Midway through March of 2020, lockdowns began to come into effect around the world, and coincidentally, or not so much, this marked the single largest one-month spike in Steam's player base ever recorded. In one single month, 4 million additional players began to utilize the platform, and that number would eventually drop as lockdowns eased, somewhat, but soon after, coinciding with new stay-at-home orders being put into place, the player base would again rise by incredible margins all the way into 2021. In short, gaming was one of the few industries to actually benefit from COVID-19 in terms of user adoption and general usage, while many others were just laid low entirely. However, that's not the main point. That's just additional context as we set the stage for a new problem, which is scalping. November of 2020 is an important month to note here, because November of 2020 is when a new console generation launched. Console generations are an interesting thing, typically speaking, often awarding multiple years of longevity as the library expands, eventually getting phased out with new hardware, but this time, things were different. I've discussed the topic before at length, so I won't go into too much detail here, but 2020's new console generation was launching into an environment where component scarcity was a very real concern. It turned out that the global supply of specific computing chips had been completely eviscerated, and the lag time to compensate was probably going to be long. This problem affected everything from the automobile industry to personal computers, but perhaps hardest hit of all were the consoles. PlayStation 5s, Xbox Series X's, also S's, were being manufactured at a rate far lower than any previous estimate would have guessed before 2020. Combine that with a gaming market that is larger than ever before when people are desperate for things to do amidst global concern over safety, with active stay-at-home orders in many separate countries across the planet, and you can probably see what was about to happen. There were not enough PS5s or next-generation Xboxes to meet demand, and this provided an incredible opportunity for the scalpers. Sponsor time. Are you aware that 2 out of 3 men experience hair loss before the age of 35? Are you also aware that by far the primary demographic who watch this channel are men ages 18 to 45? Honestly, not surprising, but still worth mentioning. There are some viewers who don't fall into that bracket, and I appreciate you a great deal, but for the sake of sponsored marketing, it aligns extremely well with a product like Keeps. Keeps is a hair loss prevention treatment with more 5-star reviews than any of its competitors. You can order and get treated directly from your own home for a cheaper price tag than competing products, and they offer generic versions of the only 2 officially FDA-approved hair loss treatments on the entire market. For a limited time, using the link directly down below in the description, you can get 50% off your first order. Again, that's 50% off your first order if you click the link down below in the description. Keeps can help prevent or even reverse the process of hair loss in some cases, so combining that with an audience who is the most susceptible demographic when it comes to hair loss in general, it's an ongoing partnership that just honestly makes sense. Big thank you to Keeps for sponsoring the channel. Here's the part where I'll go a bit more in depth on how they do it. Technology scalpers, primarily those who target graphics cards or next-generation consoles, use a variety of tools in order to secure the product. As a bit of a tangent, in an article posted by Forbes, a scalper going by the pseudonym really, Jordan, tried to claim that they provide an extremely valuable service as middlemen in the markets, and therefore the hate that they get is unjustified. I doubt he would ever see this video, of course, but on the off chance that he does, you are a special kind of idiot, Jordan. Retailers like GameStop and Best Buy are the middlemen. Scalpers are just a self-inserting detriment to the experience of everyone else around them when the commercial pipeline already provides distribution through middlemen to begin with. Products are manufactured and then handed off wholesale to a retail company like Best Buy, just as an example, who then runs logistics and allows users to interface with their commercial portal to order and receive an item. Scalpers, on the other hand, abuse that interface provided by an actual retailer, secure a large amount of items, then utilize another platform, like Facebook as an easy example, to resell that product, thus providing literally nothing to anyone at all, except a higher price for the item they could otherwise get from middleman number one, if not for the scalper. There is, point blank, objectively, period, no actual benefit whatsoever in the existence of a scalper. They are only a bad thing, all of the time, for everyone. Some people might say, well, actually, they benefit the manufacturer, like Microsoft, but no, because the hoarded inventory of a scalper is an inventory not in use, which means less people buying games for that inventory, and therefore less pipeline utilization, since Microsoft and Sony often sell hardware like consoles at a loss initially, meaning, again, scalpers are only a bad thing, period. Okay, tangent over. Fuck you, Jordan. Anyway, so how do scalpers do it? Simply put, they use bots. There's a massive number of automated programs that do this, but for today's example, I'll go with one called Carnage. Carnage is a fairly high-profile scalping program that, even as I write this video, is targeting console releases around the world. Successfully, or so they claim, grabbing thousands of units from retailers when they get a new supply, when they just restock. Not even a week ago, they were boasting about how they had destroyed the launches for multiple products. 900 units of the special edition Halo Xbox, 2,500 PS5s from Argos, even the Xbox mini fridges. Quote, another release that we destroyed. 1,000 plus successful checkouts were logged across initial and restock drop. End quote. Basically, Carnage Bot is one of many programs out there used to, as they say themselves, destroy product launches and get thousands of units into the hands of second-tier middlemen who then gouge the public for everything possible. It has been estimated that 10 to 15% or more of the entire supply for next-generation consoles thus far is being scalped. Over 500,000 units as of mid-2021 were estimated to have been sold through a set of the higher volume auction websites, like eBay or StockX in particular, and this number was even more concentrated early on in the release cycle. StockX alone, as of May 2021, had sold over 130,000 PS5s, 83,000 disc versions, and 55,000 digital. That's just one website, and Carnage is just one bot program. But the point should be well established by now that scalping had become an absolute plague on the world of gaming. PS5s reached a median price of over $1,000 in 2020 and 2021. Next generation Xboxes weren't far behind, and the market for scalping on just those two products was breaching $100 million. But that's not even the half of it. Scalping was not contained to just consoles. It also spilled over into CPU and GPUs. Now, we've already discussed the chip shortage at length, but what we haven't discussed is crypto. Not only was gaming at an all-time high during the pandemic, but the crypto mining industry was also oscillating between frantic and desperate. Crypto mining is a process that now relies heavily on specific computing parts, primarily the graphics card for low-level participants, in order to solve complex algorithms and mine the tokens. Quote-unquote mine. Well, that process is extremely intense and has a direct benefit from using as many cards as you can get your hands on. The more power, the more money. This means that in a world where supply was bottoming out, like really low, while demand from gamers was at an all-time high, demand from crypto miners was also on the rise to an all-time high. Basically, a perfect storm for scalpers. Oh, and at the start of 2021 as well, new tariffs on imports from China went into effect, and it's not fully realized what they'll do, and those are yet another aspect that has to be considered, but yeah, there was just a torrential downpour of exacerbating factors in all of this. Scalping bot programs targeted the launch of Nvidia cards, AMD cards, and everything else they could possibly think of that was currently under supply chain fatigue. Prices for new model cards went up to insane levels. At certain points, popular cards would exceed 3 times their actual retail price, and it got so bad that even users who started using the bot programs themselves to try and compete with the scalpers wouldn't even necessarily get one because so many people were doing it. Basically, things were completely fucked because scalpers were piling onto an already impossible situation to prey on regular customers. I don't recall where I saw it, but one scalper collective was even boasting that this would become the new normal. This was the way things were because their collective buying power and market dominance had opened the door to a new future where everything that you really wanted would have to be purchased from second-tier middlemen after launch inventories and restocks alike had been destroyed by their bot programs. Again, I don't remember where exactly I read it, but That had to be one of the more infuriating things that I saw on the topic during the past few years. But finally, after understanding the creation of a scalping pandemic, its birth, its origins, and its growth, now we get to look, possibly, at its brutal fall. Late November of 2021, legislation is reintroduced into the United States Senate targeting bot programs that buy up retailer stock as their primary function. The bill is less about targeted relief for one specific industry, like electronics, than it is about broader holiday regulation. It's called the Stopping Grinch Bots Act, and it's definitely not going to pass by the holidays, so it's a weird name, but that's what it's called, and that's what it's kind of trying to latch onto, which is holiday spirit. But the effects would be identical across the entire space. Enforcement, of course, would be an area of interest and a whole separate conversation entirely, because if they don't enforce a law, it doesn't matter that the law exists, so that's definitely concerning. And yes, it's not even passed yet as of the making of this video, but the sentiment is there, the awareness exists, and if the trend continues or exacerbates further, well, anything can happen. It's not an issue that is flying beneath the radar right now. In addition to this, and probably much more importantly, supply chain fatigue has been easing. It's not over yet and might extend into 2022 for certain industry sectors, but the supply chain has begun to bounce back after an incredible amount of difficulty the past year and a half. Sony has stated that it holds a large enough chip supply in reserve to meet its 2021 fiscal targets, and that's a big deal. And this kind of supply increase will radically change the dynamic between scalper and customer. AMD CEO Lisa Su also went on record with a belief that the chip shortage in particular will continue to ease into 2022, which is right around the corner. Far from certain, but a positive outlook and forward-looking indication for numerous separate industries. Lastly, and the most interesting one of all, crypto mining demand in China, the world's leading country in terms of overall crypto mining activities, by a long shot, just cratered to effectively zero. In June, the Chinese government told banks to stop facilitating transactions completely and officially banned the activity on a national level. The CCP is fully and completely against the concept of cryptocurrency. Obviously, it kind of runs counter to their entire narrative over there. And the country went from being number one, holding roughly 3/4, I believe, of the world's mining power at its peak, to almost zero. It should be stated that there was a general bounce back in the wake of this ban, which would seem to indicate that some of the Chinese hardware itself had been redeployed overseas, but that kind of demand shift, one where 1.4 billion people and countless industrial powerhouses are now effectively barred by an authoritarian government from participating at all, that kind of demand shift, or production shift, or whatever you want to call it, that utilization of hardware, has an alleviation component when you think about supply and demand for certain computer parts. Supply is rebounding, demand has taken monumental hits these past few months, and one of the world's largest consumer markets, the United States, has legislation on the table to make scalping bots completely illegal. There's a long way to go, but these factors combined give us a strong indication that the scalping pandemic, at least in terms of computer parts and entertainment products like consoles, might be starting to decline. In a more immediate sense, the average price for scalped PS5 consoles has fallen by over 30% since the peak in 2020. For graphics cards, the prices are still fairly absurd, but they are worlds away from their all-time highs just 6 months ago. Overall, the perfect storm of supply and demand is becoming much less perfect, and that is a devastating thing for scalpers, who rely on market vulnerability to prey on their victims. Now, personally, I believe that companies should be doing much more to prevent this practice in the first place, such as a limitation on console purchases to 1 per valid credit or debit card, thus forcing scalpers to have like 1,000 bank accounts if they want to make 1,000 purchases, or use 1,000 stolen identities, but that weeds out almost all of them since it carries incredible risk with it. And some companies have been making an effort, but frankly, not nearly enough. Even so, the natural cycle of market dynamics appears to have begun reshaping this particular pandemic, and as it stands, there is a significant downtrend in terms of scalper profit and control. I would like to see that downtrend continue to absolute zero, and then prison time, but maybe I'm a little extreme. Either way, that's the video. If you want to support, there are links down below. I would ask that anyone interested please support on Patreon or Locals. I'm trying to turn those into the primary channel funding mechanisms since YouTube ad revenue is anything but reliable these days, but if not, there's some other stuff as well. Odyssey, which is a YouTube platform alternative. You can watch over there, all the videos, social media links, merchandise, another YouTuber to check out and support as well, but I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching, and have a nice night.